Authentically, you good? Good. All right. Authentic leadership. Hi, Dan. My friend Dan Owolabi, and I'm going to ask Paige Brewer, our president-elect, to come join me at the lectern. Authentic leadership. I know you guys have heard me speak about this often, and I will continue to speak about this often because I am exceedingly passionate about this. Authentic leadership, and I don't want to steal Dan's thunder, so I won't say too much, but our mantra that most of you, if you haven't read it, it's up here and we'll be reading it throughout, comes from Dan's book, Authentic Leadership. I know that many of you got the Authentic Leadership book as you came in the room. Those who did not, Dan, we need more books. We'll talk about that later. Good problem to have. But this is a passion and this is our focus in 2021, how we lead, leading authentically. I'm going to ask Paige Brewer to share with us a bit of information about Mr. Dan Owolabi, and then we will let the fun begin. Paige, all you.
I know you're all jealous I get to take my mask off. Thank you, Amy, for that bit of fresh air. Hi. Mr. Dan Owolabi is co-founder of Owolabi Leadership and executive director of Branches Worldwide. A sought-after, captivating keynote speaker, Dan has spent over a decade helping others achieve exceptional results by leading with nothing to hide, nothing to prove, and nothing to lose. As a retired pastor, Dan works with a wide variety of leaders inside and outside the church and around the world. His latest book, Authentic Leaders: How to Lead with Nothing to Hide, Nothing to Prove, and Nothing to Lose, was a #1 new release on Amazon. Dan remains committed to looking inward as well as outward, continually pushing himself to embody the beliefs he so passionately shares with others. Dan holds an undergraduate degree from Malone University and a graduate degree from Ashland University. When he isn't traveling or speaking, he is most often reading, running, and spending time with his wife, Erica, and their 2 daughters. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dan Owolabi.
Everybody, it is good to be here. Thanks for the welcome. I'm excited to be here virtually with you, and I imagine that so far things have been really good with the presentation. I tell you what, for those of you that don't know me or have never had the opportunity to meet me, I haven't met you. You might be wondering who I am. So a couple things you might have already heard, but my name is Dan Owolabi. I'm a couple things. I'm the executive director of an international nonprofit called Branches Worldwide, which means I work with leaders all over the world. I have a company called Owolabi Leadership, and I do executive coaching. I do workshops, that kind of thing, on the idea of authentic leadership. I'm a father. I've got 2 beautiful daughters. I'm a husband. I have an amazing wife of 13 years. And I think about leadership every single day. And one thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is this. I've been thinking about the idea of how to lead people when you can't control people. And what I want to do is I want to share with you a couple thoughts that have really been sitting with me for a while now. First off, like I said, how to lead people when you can't control people. Now, when I say how to lead people when you can't control people, what I mean is that moment when you feel unbelievably frustrated because the person that you're trying to lead isn't listening. You're trying to help them. This is for their best interest. You're trying to make their life better. They can't see it, they won't move, and you, for whatever reason, can't move them. You can't control them. You see, in those moments, it can be unbelievably frustrating. And in those moments, you probably ask yourself, how do I lead people when I can't control people? Well, let me tell you a quick story about one of the first times that I realized that I did not know how to lead people when I couldn't control people. I had no clue how to do it. It was early in my leadership journey. It was actually when I was a teacher. I was a teacher like a couple lifetimes ago, it feels like. I was teaching at an inner city school. And essentially what happened was I was with these students and I was with a bunch of other teachers, and we were trying to figure out how we can best inspire these students. They were going through a really rough time, and a lot of them were on track to not graduate. These were freshmen, and we knew by the time they became seniors, there's a really good chance they wouldn't graduate. All the indicators were there: really rough home life, single parent households, like things like that we knew would make it tough for them to graduate. All that to say, we decided on an idea. We said, we are going to take these kids camping. Because what we're going to do is we're going to solidify the group. We're going to make them all feel like, they're sort of part of each other. And then they're all going to work together to kind of get out of this difficult situation. We were trying to build influence and bonding, that kind of thing. And so all the teachers got together in this one, sort of group, and we said, we're going to take these kids camping. They had never been camping before. And so some of them were terrified, but we knew we could lead them in the moment. So what we did is we got them all on this bus, and they all traveled to a place where they were going to go camping. All that to say, ultimately, we were driving, we got there, they were completely scared. They didn't quite know what to do next. But as the first day went by, they became a little more comfortable. The second day went by, they became even more comfortable. The third day that went by, they were sharing openly. They were really bonding with each other. They really kind of worked out some differences between each other. And all of us teachers realized that we were doing something with them. When we said something, they listened. When we asked them to do something, they actually did it. It felt like we were gaining influence with these guys. And we knew we could go back to the school after this camping trip and have even more influence in their lives. And so we were excited by the progress we made while we were camping. All that to say, we got on the big bus and we were driving back home. And I remember thinking on the way back, it was hours that we were driving. I remember thinking on the way back, I wonder if we're going to have the same amount of influence with our kids now as we do when we get back to school. I wonder if it's going to transfer. I didn't know, but I found out pretty quickly. Suddenly, the bus pulls into the school, and the kids kind of stand up and they take their luggage out from the top bunks, and the students go to get off the bus. And I tell everybody, hey, hold on, everybody. Marcus, Thomas, John, hey guys, just hang on real quick. Don't go anywhere. Let's go up to our classroom and let's wait for your parents to get here. I was given instructions on what to do next. And I promise you, every one of those kids on the bus, they turned and they looked at me. And then in half a second, they all ran. I mean, literally, they grabbed their bags and they started sprinting off the bus. And they were running into the parking lot, running across the street, running away from me and the entire teaching team. And I remember thinking, I can't catch these kids. I mean, they're sprinting everywhere. This is like the early 2000s where kids have like baggy pants. And so one kid is like running with the bag and trying to hold his pants up at the same time. I mean, it was just comical afterwards. But at the time, I was mortified, because I realized that I didn't have the ability to lead kids unless I had control over them. They only listened to me because I controlled them while we were camping. They didn't have anyone else to listen to. That's why they were doing everything I asked them to do. That's why they were listening to me when I asked them to do something. It's because I had control. But once I didn't have control over them, they were gone. And I remember asking myself there while I was standing there, how in the world do you lead people when you can't control people? Well, I can't control these kids. How do I lead them? Well, you might not have been in a situation like that, but I imagine you've asked yourself that same question before. I imagine some of you have spouses who you've been trying to lead for years, decades maybe. Could be your husband or your wife. And year after year, they keep doing things that hurt themselves and that hurt other people. And it doesn't matter how often you say it or how many arguments you have, it's the same thing year over year. And you ask yourself this question: how do I lead them when I can't control their behavior? Some of you have employees and you ask yourselves that same question because you have employees that are doing just enough to not get fired. I mean, just enough. You can't control them. You can't force them to be better. You can't fire them. So how do you lead them? Some of you are leading volunteers. I used to be a pastor for 10 years and I led volunteers all day long. And volunteers are sometimes the most frustrating people to lead because you can't fire them in a lot of ways. And oftentimes they quit and they walk away and you can't figure out, how do I lead these people? You can't pay them. What do you do when you can't control them? For some of you, you have business partners, you have children, you have bosses. You have people in your life that you would like to lead to better behavior. You'd like to help them grow, but you can't control them. And so you ask yourself, how do I lead people when I can't control them? Well, if that's you, then I'm really glad that you've tuned in today. You know, one of the things that's most important to understand in this is that it is possible to lead people when you can't control people. And it starts by understanding two simple concepts. The first thing to understand is this: authority. Understanding the difference between authority and influence, like I'll share later, is the key here. You see, authority for leaders is the power to get people to do your will against their will. The power to get people to do your will against their will. They don't actually want to listen to you, but you have authority. And so you can force them to do it, right? That's that control piece. You know, the other day, I was, truth be told, in my job as an international nonprofit leader, I lead leaders around the world. I get to travel different places. And the other day I was driving in Jamaica. And don't tell anybody I told you the story, but I got pulled over. And I'm driving on this big highway, and all of a sudden I see lights flashing behind me, and I'm going too fast, and the cop pulls me over, and I just for half a second think to myself, man, maybe I should just like hit the gas and just go and see if I can outrun this guy, just for half a second. And then my better angels take over, and I'm like, you know what, that's a dumb idea. That is probably the worst idea I've ever had. So I pull over. And I realized, one of the key indicators that got me to stop my car was the fact that the police officer, when he came up to my car in Jamaica, the police officer had authority. It's called a gun. He had it on his side, and I could see it, right? He had the power to get me to do his will against my will. I wanted to do my own thing, but he had the power to get me to do something different. Now, here's the truth. Every leader, when you start off, has authority. You have power, but authority has a limited shelf life. If you're a leader with authority, you better learn to gain influence really quickly, because pretty soon people get tired of being bossed around and being told what to do, and they start to rebel in all kinds of small ways. So the second thing you need to do is understand influence. The ability to get people to do your will based on who you are and where you're headed. Now, when I say the ability to get people to do your will based on who you are and where you're headed, what I mean is that influence has very little to do with forcing people. It's about sort of getting people to understand you because of your character and because of your motivation, because of your direction. Here's a quick story to help you understand what influence is really all about. It was a story I heard a long time ago, and I thought it was so powerful. It was about a small town in Pennsylvania. And essentially this town had a mental facility in it. And one of the challenges of the mental facility was the fact that they were so full. They had a lot of people and a lot of patients in there, and they were running out of space. And so the administrator said, hey, let's do this. Let's go out and let's go ahead and let's see if we can create some halfway houses. Halfway houses are the sort of the space between normal life in the community and the mental facility. Essentially gives people an opportunity to learn to cook and clean and make friends and do all the things that will help them, transition to normal life. It's a halfway house, halfway between. And so they wanted to create halfway houses in the community. In order to do that, they had to go to the city council of the small town. They had to ask them, hey, can we create halfway houses in this community? And so the people at city council said, hey, look, we need to hold a hearing on this. We need to have a town meeting. And, typically town meetings, if you guys have ever been to town council meetings, they're just small and boring. No one shows up. It's not that big of a deal. So the leaders of the mental facility were like, yeah, that's fine. We can do this. And so they set a date for the meeting. Everybody shows up, the council shows up, and the people who are the administrators of the mental facility, they plan to show up as well. And then word gets out in the community that they want to build halfway houses. And suddenly, where there typically are 5 or 10 people at this meeting, now there are hundreds. I mean, people show up from all over the community, and they are mad. I mean, angry. Because word gets out that they're going to put people who have mental disabilities in their community, People are screaming at this meeting. It's standing room only. And there are people who are saying, like, you better not put a halfway house next to my house. If one of those crazies gets out and gets my daughter, I'm going to come after you. I mean, people were just upset. And so the administrators tried to make a case, but the feeling of the community was clear. And so one by one, the city council members all voted down the line to not put halfway houses in their community. They said, hey, look, you guys got to figure out something else. Obviously, we're not ready for this. Then, just as they voted, just as they finished, the back doors of the city council opened. Packed room, the back doors open up, and down the center aisle walks, and I kid you not, true story, walks Mother Teresa. She was in town at a local college to get an award, and so she was in the area anyway, and she heard that the city was voting on the fate of people who had mental disabilities, and she's Mother Teresa, so she shows up to things like this. So she shows up, walks down the center aisle, gets on her knees in front of the entire city council, and she says 5 times, she says, please, 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 please make room for these children of God. On her knees. And then she gets up. She dusts off her dress. And then she walks to the back of the room. Then she walks out. The room is completely silent. And then suddenly, the city council members all look at each other and they vote again. And unanimously vote to reverse the decision that they just less than 5 minutes before voted on. See, the question for you and the question for me is, how is it possible for a woman who's not elected, who didn't know anybody in the room, who had no business being there, no personal stake, how was she able to change a room full of angry people, change all their minds just like that? The city council voted and no one said a word. No one objected. No one fought back. They just let it happen. How was Mother Teresa able to do that? Well, the answer is influence. She knew who she was and she knew where she was headed. And that's how she got people to join. You see, people knew who Mother Teresa was. She had years and years and years of experience working with some of the poorest people around the world, caring for the poor and the marginalized. People knew that she believed what she said. And people knew where she was headed. She said, we need to care for these people. Let's make room for these people. And when she said that out loud, the force of her life, along with the force of her words, made a compelling case, and everybody instantly understood they could make room for people with mental disabilities. True story. Mother Teresa had influence. She was able to get people to do things without controlling them, leading them without controlling them. So the question for you and the question for me is, how do you do it? If you're not Mother Teresa, how do you do it? Well, I want to give you 3 specific things that you can do in the time that we have left. 3 ways that you can lead people without controlling people. Now, it starts, there we go. It starts with these 3 things. First thing you do is you preach what you practice. When I say preach what you practice, it's a reversal of what we typically think. Oftentimes we think we just only practice what we preach, right? That's the kind of thing that we're looking for. But it's actually the other way around. Only preach what you have practiced. Only say what you have already done. Don't tell people to do something that you have never done, or don't tell people to do something that you would never actually do, or you're not willing to do. Because here's the reality. People will follow your example far quicker than they'll follow your words. Here's a helpful quote. This is from Thomas Watson. He was the CEO of IBM for a long time. He made IBM into IBM. And here's something that he said. He said, nothing so conclusively proves a man or woman's ability to lead others as what he or she does from day to lead themselves. Lead yourself first. People will see your example, and that becomes the driving force that gives you the ability to lead other people. There's nothing worse than trying to follow a leader that doesn't actually practice what they say. And so don't get into the habit of that. Instead, only preach, only say the things that you are doing or that you're practicing. And then what you'll see is that your practice will start to match your preaching. You'll lead with your practice, and then you'll start talking about it. That is key. Mother Teresa did the same thing. She didn't tell people to care for the sick and the orphans and the lonely. She didn't tell them to do it. She did it. And then she was able to talk about it because she had credibility. That's real leadership. That's the first thing. Only preach what you practice. Now, here's the second thing. It's critical that you connect the vision. After you preach what you practice, it's about you. It's about you being able to say what you're doing and actually be able to tell people this works. I'm doing it now, right? You preach what you practice. The second thing you have to do is you have to connect the vision. Now, when I say connect the vision, what I mean is that people do the things that they do, not for your reasons, but for their reasons. Have you ever met someone who has been for a long time trying to get you to do something? And the reason why they want you to do something is all these reasons that have to do with them and their life and the things that they think that you want. And they haven't actually taken the time to get to know you and what you actually want in your life. The best leaders are the ones that make you feel something about the vision, feel something about where you're headed. Here's one of my favorite quotes. It's from Maya Angelou. She says this. She says, people will forget what you said. They'll forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. When they think of you, they will feel something. That's important. The best leaders are the ones that are able to connect the vision, where we're all going, why we're all doing this, why this matters, why the work that we're doing is worth the hard work and the effort and your best and your excellence, why that is worth it. They're able to connect the vision with your personal life. Hey guys, we're all doing this for this reason. And you in particular, you're doing this, I know you're doing this for your kids. You're doing this for your future. You're doing this because you want to be a better leader. And if you follow us and if you go with us, I promise you that will happen to you too. I was a pastor for a long time. Like I said, one of my jobs was to lead volunteers. And the number one way that we led volunteers, people who wouldn't get paid, but we wanted them to show up and do their best every single day, was by connecting the vision of the entire organization to their personal life and making sure they feel it. Hey, we're doing this partly for your own personal vision, because we knew that they were doing the work not because of our big vision, but because of their personal vision. They wanted something out of it too. So it was my job as a leader to connect our work to their vision. So the question that I have for you is this: as you're leading your staff, as you're leading your family, as you're leading volunteers, do you know why they do what they do? Do you know why they're following you right now? If you don't, you have no chance of connecting the vision to their life. You've got to sit down and get to know them as people. You've got to understand their why. And when you do, you're in a much better position to now lead them for their reasons, not for your reasons. So the second thing you have to do is you have to connect the vision. Now, here's the third thing. And this, in my opinion, is the most important thing. This is grabbing a towel. Once you've preached what you practice, right? You only preach the things that you say you're going to do. And then you connect the vision. You get to know them as people. You understand why they show up every day. And so you do everything you can to connect the vision and what you want to do and where you want to go with their own personal life. And you do things for their reasons, not your reasons. Then you grab a towel. Now, when I say grab a towel, here's what I mean by that. What I mean is that there's really just two kinds of leaders. That's it. There's only two kinds of leaders. There are leaders that lead with a clipboard, and then there's leaders that lead with a towel. Let me explain it. See, when you lead with a clipboard, you're the sort of leader that's focused on critiquing. You've got a clipboard, you have all the rights and wrongs. You're like, okay, here's exactly what we need to do. I have all the answers. I have all the things I need. And I'm just going to make sure that everybody falls in line. You're leading with a clipboard. And then there's other leaders that don't lead by critiquing, but they lead by serving. It's not about critiquing. It's not about the rules. You know what needs to be done. And you know how to tell people what to do, and you know exactly where you need to go and that kind of stuff. You've done your homework, but you're also willing to jump in and help. You're willing to grab a towel and get in there and do the work with people. You're there to work side by side. You're there to serve them, figure out what they need, and then help them meet those needs. You're all about serving, getting dirty with people, getting a towel and doing the work right there with them. I want you to think about your leadership journey. I bet the most effective leaders in your life, your coaches, parents, bosses, people you've had in your own life as you've grown as a leader, the most effective ones have led with a towel. You believe that they believed in you. You believe that they're willing to get in there and serve you and to help you. They weren't about to stand 10 feet away and tell you what to do. They wanted to help you actually get there. They got to know you as a person. And then they led you with influence. Those are the best leaders in our life because we know that they care. And we also have examples of leaders that led with a clipboard, where we knew that they were the boss, but man, all they have is just how to tell us what to do. They weren't about to help us. We have people in our life like that too. Let me tell you a story about when I had to face the opportunity of either leading with a clipboard or a towel. Like I said, I lead in a lot of different places, and one of the ways that I'd led before was with a church. And one of the things that happened to me is I walked into this church, and this is what I realized. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I'm a black guy, and I'm 6'4". I'm a huge guy. I stand out everywhere. And the church that I was leading was in the middle of Amish country, meaning I couldn't go miles and miles and miles and find another black person. Like I was the only one. And so I walked into the church knowing that it was going to be challenging to lead. And I couldn't lead with authority because with the people that I was leading, you know, a lot of them are just much, much older than me. I was 22 at the time. A lot of them are much, much older than me. And a lot of them had just more experience in life than I would ever get to lead them. And so it was just a challenging moment. And I did some research and tried to figure out exactly how to lead them. One of the things I found was that the church was one of those churches where the actual leader of the church wasn't the pastor. The leader of the church was the oldest member of the church. That was the de facto leader. And I found out that leader of the church was a woman named Maddie Miller. And I knew if I could win over Maddie Miller, if I could gain influence with her, then I would have a chance of leading all the other 300 people in the church. And so I started meeting with Maddie Miller and getting to know Maddie Miller. And I had the opportunity to lead with a clipboard and say, Maddie, here's my vision. Here's what I think we need to do is with this organization, with this church. And you either get along or you don't. And just have a clear come to Jesus moment. We're really just going to argue with each other, that kind of thing. No, that's not the way to do it. And I realized right away that it wasn't going to work. And so what I did instead was I said, Maddie, would you like to get breakfast sometime? She's like, sure. I learned that she likes to cook breakfast at her house. And so I said, okay, maybe I could come over and have breakfast, maybe pancake, eggs, And she's like, absolutely, She's this old crotchety woman, She looks at me like, who are you? At the time, she was like 87 years old and I was 27 years old, right? So Maddie was like old when I was born, right? And I was still 27, right? So, she didn't look at me like I was her leader at all. And I knew I had to win her over. And so when I asked her to go over to her house, she said, sure, whatever, She had me over. I sat down. We had eggs, we had bacon, we had pancakes. It was good. And we didn't talk about any church stuff. I didn't try to win her over. I just got to know her as a person, right? And then when we were done, I said, hey, thanks for the time. Maybe I can come back next week. She's like, sure, this was great. So I said, okay. I came back the next week. And then after that was done, I said, hey, can I come back next week? And she's like, sure, if you want to. I said, okay. So I came back the next week. And then I came back the next week and the next week. I went to Maddie's house for a year straight for breakfast every week. I remember rolling over one morning and my wife looking at me. I was about to go to Maddie's house. She's like, hey, going over to your girlfriend's house again, huh? And I'm like, yeah, she's kind of cute. You know, what's the problem there? You know, as I started meeting with Maddie, something strange started to happen. Probably after 36 weeks or so, she started to talk to me differently. You know, Maddie started to tell me about some of the things that were going on in her life that she hadn't told anyone else. She told me that she was lonely because she was one of the oldest women in the church and the young women didn't come talk to her anymore, that people respected her, but they didn't like her. And sometimes really all you want in your life is just to be liked sometimes. She told me that because she was old and couldn't get around as much, she hadn't held a baby of grandkids and so she said she hadn't held a baby in years, and that just crushed her. She said, I don't even know if I ever will hold a baby. So what I did, and then I went up to Maddie after I talked to my wife. The next morning, I grabbed my baby daughter and I went back to Maddie's house and I knocked on the door. I said, Maddie, I've got my daughter. She was 2 at the time, or younger than that. She's probably 18 months at the time. And I said, Maddie, do you want to hold my daughter? And Maddie grabbed my daughter, who, excuse me, was like 4 or 5 months at the time, grabbed my daughter and held her. And then she started to cry. And she started to cry. In that moment, I took a big step back and I took this picture. Because I knew that I was serving Maddie in a way that she hadn't been served before. Here's the thing. I ended up leaving the church a few years later, and Maddie and I sat down and talked. And she was mad at me for leaving. She was upset. But she said something to me. She said, Dan, you have been one of my best friends during this season of my life. And that's when I knew that I'd won Maddie over. Not through manipulation, not through a clipboard, but by serving her, by figuring out what she needed, and then authentically helping her get it. I knew I had won the permission to lead Maddie. Here's my question for you. How do you lead the people around you? Do you lead with a clipboard or do you lead with a towel? Are you the kind of person that practices what you preach, or do you preach what you practice? Ultimately, your influence, your ability to lead people without controlling people, comes down to people's ability to believe in who you are and the direction that you're going in life, and they want to follow you because of it. So, may you preach what you practice. May you connect the vision, and may you grab a towel and serve the people around you. And may you learn to lead people without controlling people, becoming an authentic leader throughout the process. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Dan, You can hear me, right? Thumbs up, you can hear me? I will tell you, and for everyone who was watching me on stage on my phone, I wasn't just texting randomly. I was talking to the people in the back room running Zoom, and the feedback online, and Kishana wanted me to share this, was raving about you, and I thank you. We can't see them, but to hear in the chat how much you reach them, and to my friends in the room, you know, when I read the book and the story about Maddie, I mean, I got choked up sitting up here. I had to look away so you all wouldn't see. Is it not from the heart and leading from the heart? And what I was trying to tell so many of you at our leadership summit, does this make sense? Authentic leadership? And Dan, you have our commitment. I had never heard that before, but we will be grabbing the towel, my friend. Thank you for that.
I love it. I love it. Good luck to you guys. This has been
Thanks,
fun.
Dan.